Hello Linux fans. Today we're going to discuss the passwd file in Linux, or what is sometimes called the password file. The password file doesn't actually contain the real password. It contains the letter X as a placeholder. It used to contain the password, which is why they call it the password file, but a few years ago, for security reasons, they took it out. And we will discuss that a little bit later on in the video. What the password file does do is it acts as a big database file that contains all the user data about the user accounts. Now, if you remember what a database is, databases are made up of records, and each record is made up of fields. The way the passwd database is arranged, and we'll see this when we actually take a look at a passwd file, every line is a record, and all of the variables on that line, which are separated by colons, are a field. And our passwd file acts as a database that represents all the user data associated with daemons, processes, and accounts. In the password or passwd database, each line is the record and each value on a line is a field. So let's fire up our virtual Linux computer here and take a look at an actual passwd file. So now we will take a look at an actual passwd file. So I have Linux Mint Cinnamon 18.3 up and running. It is considered a configuration type file. In other words, it is an ordinary text file. So you can look at it with an ordinary text editor. It is in the etc subdirectory. So what we will do is we will open up a terminal session right here. We will maximize it so that we could get a little better view. And we could see we're in home right now, so we're going to change directory to the etc subdirectory. We know we're there, and we know it's a text file, so we will use the less viewing utility to look at it. So we will type in less passwd, and that calls up our passwd file right here. You notice this top line, okay, here, okay, that's for root, and then you start with the daemon processes here. As I mentioned, each of these lines is a record in the database, and each one of these variables between the colons is a field. It is what they call a colon delimited file, which means the colons separate the different fields within the record which make up the lines. So we will look at first what each line contains. The first variable right here, or the first field, is basically going to be the user. That could be either a daemon, as in these top processes here, or it could be an individual user that's using the account. The second field right there we could see is an X. That's where I mentioned the passwords used to be stored. They're not anymore. Because of security, they have been moved to another file called the shadow file. But remember, this file contains all of the user information which a lot of these processes need. That's why we had to keep this file intact. But a lot of the processes that need other user information do not need the actual password itself. That's only required for authentication into the system initially, or for permissions to run specific applications which are handled through our PAMs, plug-in authentication modules. So that is able to be moved out into what they call the shadow file, which will be covered in another video. The rest of the user data that the run-of-the-mill and ordinary processes and applications need is stored here. The third field right here is what they call the UID or the PID. In Linux, everything is done with identifiers. We have the process identification number, the PID, or the user ID, user identifier number. Linux does not use user names. That's one of the reasons we need the password file with the information other than the password in it, because a lot of processes need information contained in the password file, but they don't need the actual password. The actual password is only used for logging in, but the username, expiration dates, the type of a shell, other information and comments, that type of information is really needed by many other processes and possibly other users that are also using the system. So in the Linux passwd password file, we have all that information, but it's tied to an identifier number that's unique to the user or process and not necessarily the user name. And again, it's between the colons, colon delimited. Then you have this 0 here, which is the primary group. The primary group is basically the PID or the UID of the group that the user or process is a member of. So you think of it user, group, and everybody else. This is the identifier for the group. Okay, you have here root. Okay, in the top line. Okay, it could be something else. In this line, it's daemon, and it's other things depending which line you're in. Okay, what that is that's a comment field for other information. You could have anything there. You could have the name of the process, the username. You could have phone numbers. You could have a variety of different things depending on what it is you're looking for. In this first line, it's root. Okay, this second occurrence, okay, it looks similar. In this case, it's /root. Okay, that slash could make a big difference. What that is that's actually the home directory of either the user or the process that particular line is about. Since the first line in the passwd file is the line for the root user, which is always PID 0 or process ID 0, your home directory is /root. Keep in mind that's different from /, which is the root directory of your file system. The root directory of the file system is different than the home directory of the root user. In this case, it's /root, which means it's the file system of the root user. And last but definitely not least, you have this final section right here, /bin/bash. That is the shell that will open with that particular process or user. And that could be a bunch of different things, which we'll be getting to in a minute. As a matter of fact, the rest of the video is sort of related to this field right here. And in this case, we're opening up the bash shell for the root user. At this point in the video, I'd like to make a differentiation between the first line, the second through however many lines, and I'm going to scroll down for this, okay, up to where the second field here hits 1,000, okay? And you notice it's a little bit of a scroll here. That's why it's good to be in a terminal. If you watch the video I made on terminal versus TTY, it's a lot easier to do this in an editor in terminal or even in a utility in terminal than it is a TTY, because you do have this easy scrolling capabilities. Okay, root user, PID 0 by definition. All other users, at least in the Linux Mint Ubuntu world, it could be different in Fedora, CentOS, Red Hat. Some of the others start at 1,000, but in the Mint Ubuntu world, your system users, your regular users, usually start at PID or UID of 1,000. So 1,000 and below, not counting 0, are usually your daemon processes. And you can consider 0 a daemon also. 0 could be a little iffy because it's root. Okay, but 1 through 999 are definitely daemon processes. You get up to 1,000 and above, and you're dealing with your users. Okay, I also want to point out, and I've added 2 additional users here. You see Scott and Julie. Okay, they're my 2 users to my system here. I, of course, am Tech. Tech is the username when you create the system, and that's also your sudo password. So whatever password you use when you create the system, that becomes the default sudo password. And then I could add these passwords to the sudoers file, but that's optional. That's up to me. So Tech is 1,000 because Tech is the one that created the system. It's also the sudoer's password. You notice Scott here is 101 and Julie is 102. You notice as I add users, they go up sequentially. And there's another video you could watch on user administration commands, user admin commands. There's the add user or the user add utilities, which basically modify this file and create additional users. That's the topic of a different video. Here we see the result of those utilities. They add the password, which again in this file is just represented by an X for a placeholder. If we check the shadow file, we will see the salted hash of the password there. And again, another video on salted hashes. That's where the actual salted hash of the password is. We see the process ID, or in this case, it's now a UID, user ID, because these are users of 1,001, 1,002. Okay, that's the primary group. These are my comments right here, and I included their full names. Well, not really their correct names, but I just put in a Scott Decker and a Julie Smith. Okay, comments. This actually is the phone number that I put in when I ran the user add command, and that's what it picked to put there. Okay, the home directory, if you notice, is our /home/Scott for our Scott user, and /home/Julie for our Julie user. When you look at the video on password, on home directories, excuse me, you see that all the users are under /home/ whatever the user name is. And that's borne out in this file right here by the user Scott and user Julie being in the /home/Scott and /home/Julie directories. As far as the shell goes, this is what I wanted to point out. Okay, Scott doesn't have bash. Okay, he's got sh, which is actually the born shell, not the born again shell. Whatever shell you have highlighted in the passwd file, that's the shell that's going to load by default when that user logs in. So it could be bash, it could be born, it could be C, it could be corn, or it could be no shell at all. You see here for this process right here, okay, where it's bin/bin/false. Okay, that user could theoretically log in, but there's not going to be any shell for them. This is very often a technique used when you're disabling accounts, when you have an employee that left the company and you don't want them to be able to log in anymore. And what you want to do is disable them from being able to do anything with the system. There's many ways to do that. One of those is having a default shell of /bin/false, which is no shell. Or you could have this sbin no login. That's also a way to not have a shell. So there's a number of different ways you could accomplish that task. And that's basically what I wanted to go over in this video about the passwd file. Thank you for watching, everybody. Bye-bye.